Welcome to the Exploring Unschooling podcast. I'm Pam Laricchia, unschooling mom and author, bringing you interviews, information, and inspiration about unschooling and living joyfully with your family. You can find the episode show notes, your free Exploring Unschooling ebook, and lots more information at livingjoyfully.ca. And here's the show. Hello everyone, I'm Pam Laricchia, and this is episode number 44 of the podcast. It's the 2nd of November, 2016, as I record this intro. In this episode, I ask Jennifer Andersen 10 questions about unschooling. Jennifer is an unschooling mom of 2 kids and is the founder of ourmuddyboots.com and its related active Facebook page. I had so much fun chatting with her. We talk about how we both keep learning over and over, that learning happens everywhere, triggers that can sneak up on us, the difference between natural and contrived consequences, how unschooling isn't about having all the answers, her experience at the Free to Be Unschooling conference, and much more. Thanks so much to Jennifer for taking the time to chat with me. Twice. As an update this week, I finished the outline for my first fiction novel this week. I sent it to an editor, and after mostly moving through my resistance and fear, I am now looking forward to getting his notes back this week and writing the book as part of NaNoWriMo. November is National Novel Writing Month, a fun challenge to write 50,000 words in a month. If you haven't heard of Nano and are intrigued, you can check out nanowrimo.org for all the information and sign up if you're interested. And if you want to connect there as writing buddies, I'm Pam L. from Ontario, Canada. And a big thank you to everyone supporting the show on Patreon, especially to new patrons Michelle Costa and Caitlin Walker. I deeply appreciate your Patreon support. It feels like we're a team, happily sharing information with anyone who's curious to learn more about unschooling and explore ways to live this wonderful lifestyle with their family. If you'd like to support the show, even for as little as $1 a month, check out the Exploring Unschooling page at patreon.com. That's patreon.com/exploring unschooling. And this week, I wanted to share a quote from this episode because I just love the golf analogy Jennifer used talking about deschooling. She said, "Moving through that not knowing what to do to knowing what to do, at least in my experience, was when I got those sweet spot moments of our relationship being so connected and really feeling like I got this unschooling thing. At first, those moments were so few and far between. They were kind of like, for golfers, that perfect golf shot. They're elusive, but they increase the more that you practice. That was my experience with moving through that period. I'd get that one moment of, this is it, this is what it is. We're happy, our relationship is so strong and connected, look at how he or she is flourishing. Then eventually moving beyond that, so those moments made up more of our day than less of our day." I love that point. They're elusive, but they increase the more you practice. So spot on in my experience. And I'm just going to leave you with that image as we move on to the interview with Jennifer. Hi everyone, I'm Pam Laricchia from livingjoyfully.ca, and today I'm here with Jennifer Andersen. Hi Jennifer.
Hi Pam.
Hi. It is so wonderful to have you on the show. Jennifer is an unschooling mom of 2, and she is the founder of ourmuddyboots.com, as well as managing an active Facebook page. I've really enjoyed reading her blog for a few years now, and I have 10 questions for you, Jennifer, so let's dive in.
That sounds awesome. Thank you so much for having me here, Pam. I really am happy about it.
Oh, I am really, really excited. This should be lots of fun.
Good, awesome.
Okay, our first question. I was hoping you could share with us a bit about you and your family and how you came to unschooling.
Yeah, sure. I'm a very unlikely homeschooler and even less likely unschooler, looking at like who I was 15 and 20 years ago. I have 2 kids. Owen just turned 9 about a month ago, and Sydney is about to turn 7. And you know, when Owen was born, we had my husband, well, me more than my husband, but had a vision of what life would look like, and it wouldn't involve our lives changing very much. So, you know, Owen was going to sleep in his own bed and, his own crib in his own room from the first night. And of course, that changed as soon as we met him and really understood that he was a person. And for the first 6 or 8 months of me being a mother, I really struggled because everything everybody was telling me was not in line with what I felt like I needed to do for my son. So I had some pretty significant postpartum depression when my son was born. And I really believe there are a lot of factors, of course, but a lot of that was because of that disconnect that I felt between what I thought my baby needed and everybody telling me that, that was wrong. So we really kind of hit a lot of our attachment parenting choices from the beginning just to keep those critics at bay so I could try to focus on my son. And as he moved, as he got older and moved through like the toddler years and then we hit school age, we were so connected. Sending him to school just did not feel right. It just felt like it was going to break that connection that we had. And it would, all that personal work I had done to be able to honor our relationship just felt like it was going out the window. But I am not kidding when I say I didn't know there was any other option. So we found like the best preschool that we could possibly find. They were making their own, organic, vegetarian, homemade lunch every morning and eating it all together in the afternoon. And they were speaking Italian and it seemed wonderful. And the first day that I dropped him, he was crying, and the teacher, through a frustrated conversation, told me that it was in his best interest that I leave him while he was crying. And I had never done that. I was an attachment parent and I had never done that. And I listened to her and I left him. And the look on his face is one I will never forget ever. And I got into my minivan with I had Sydney at the time, who was a few months old. And I called my husband, who was in a meeting, and he came out of the meeting and I was crying myself and so upset. And he said, just go back and get him. Just go back and get him. Like, your gut has never steered you wrong, listen to it and go get him. So I drove around for a little while and then I did go back and get him. And that was kind of our introduction into the school world. And so we pulled him out of school. We kept telling everybody that he was just too young. And he was. I put him in when he was really young, that he was just too young. So he would just stay with me until we found something better. He would just stay with me till we found something better. And, a year passed and 2 years passed. And then he became like officially school aged. And at that point, I just kept telling people that he had missed the cutoff date, which really was true. It was by a week, so I could have pushed to get him into kindergarten. But I missed and then in that, I think it was that fall that Owen should have been in kindergarten. This wonderful friend of mine, Vanessa, I met through an attachment parenting play group, I think, and and actually right before that, one fall afternoon, Sydney was 2, Owen, or I guess Sydney was almost 3, Owen was 5, and we were standing on this beautiful New England fall day, and in the road, they were riding their bikes, such a gorgeous afternoon, and it like dawned on me. I was like, I think there are some kids that don't go to school. I think they're called homeschoolers. Like it was so foreign to me that I just had no idea. And then I met my friend Vanessa, and she introduced me to unschooling and radical unschooling, and that's where I had no idea how we were going to do it or how it all worked, but that's where I felt like we finally had reconnected with kind of the first 4 years of Owen's life, and that was the direction that we'd head in. So that was our beginning.
That is wild. And it had so many similarities too, with mine as I listen to people's stories. It's so interesting because, I had that same, at the first few years as a baby and toddler, that disconnect between all the messages I was getting but this person in front of me is giving me real messages.
Absolutely.
I can tell that's not going to work for him. And then you can feel all the whispers, over your shoulder. She's spoiling him. She's going to blah, 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 So there was that. And I had never, ever heard the word homeschooling. So, my kids went to school. It wasn't until my oldest was 9. And I only came across the word searching online. Like, there was nobody amazing? Here in Canada that was doing it.
Right.
Nobody that I came across anyway in any of my circle. But yeah, no, it's fascinating how everybody comes to it, isn't it?
It really is. And you mentioned those whispers. Sometimes they aren't whispers, right?
Well, that's true. You have to work to keep them
You,
at the whisper level,
it's
right?
so true. It is so true. Yes.
Hmm. Okay, question number two. Let's skip forward a few years, and I would love to hear about what your kids are up to right now, what they're interested in, how they're pursuing it.
Yeah, sure. So, both of my kids love doing like science experiments or sciencey things. So we've been starting our day off with something along those lines. And Owen likes Legos. It's not one of his, like most favorite things, but he does like to play with Legos. He really loves music. Not so much the creating it with an instrument himself, but he loves to kind of learn about the inspiration for different songs. He loves to look at how it all comes together and kind of what technology is used to do that and what it sounds like with technology and without technology. So we've been looking at that together on YouTube and live music and festivals and that kind of thing. But Owen's big thing is gaming. He's a huge gamer, and that was definitely a tough one for me to get used to and to really embrace with him. But he loves it and he's really good at it. And there are so many cool elements to gaming that I never could have appreciated. And right now, he's in the process of creating his own video game. So he's been working on the storyline for it for the last, I would say, 6 months. He's been working on the storyline, and we've been doing a lot of that together, which has been fun. And now he's working or now he's thinking ahead to, okay, I've got the storyline. What do I need to know now to make this happen? So he's looking at how much of this can I actually do myself, coding, programming, voices, that kind of thing, versus how much am I going to have to look for other people to come in and do that for me, because the efficiency of me learning to do that isn't in line with how quickly I want to finish that. So that's how he's been pursuing his gaming. And Sydney, my daughter, who's almost 7, she is a creator. She loves to create. She will use anything to create art, sound, anything from glitter to leaves to, we just did this little activity. We tore up a bunch of paper that had stuff written on it, and she just took a bunch of washi tape and recreated this bird out of it. Like, so it's so cool to watch her. I'm not particularly creative in that way, so it's been so fun to watch her. And she also loves board games, so we've been doing a lot of board games. And I know you have a podcast that I haven't listened to about that yet, Pam, but so we've been having fun playing a lot of board games together.
Oh, you get some good ideas there too.
Yeah.
I was really excited. I have some things on my list after that episode
Awesome.
for the kids. Yeah, yeah. And the other thing I wanted to point out, I'm just thinking about the gaming again because I just finished. Actually, it came out today. This month's Q&A episode, and gaming really is a question that we get asked over and over again, and it's very understandable because technology is so new, right? I mean, for and somebody posted something talking about the I guess prejudice that we can feel for our children's activities, technology, digital activities, because it is just something so out of our experience, right? When we grew up, our children's childhood years are so different than ours. And I think that's why it's so hard for us, because we all have like this image in our head, of what we imagine childhood to be like.
Yep.
Similar or not to our own, but none of our imagination included, all the really interesting technology and gaming and visual media and stuff that our kids have now. So, I mean, it's understandable that it takes work to see the value in it, but there's immense value there, isn't it?
There really is, and I so relate. I mean, obviously, so many of us do, but I so relate to everything you just said, Pam. I really do. It's I love that word prejudice. I have so much prejudice against it, and that I'm trying to work through. And once, in the last 6 months, I've started to truly see the value in gaming, and that was a huge shift that really took away a lot of that prejudice. And I love that idea of thinking even back to our own childhoods, what messages we were giving, because TV, you know, the age of watching so much TV and having so much available was new when I was a child. We just had so much of it. So that pull maybe for our parents too of the value being outside or reading a book, and now we're in front of a screen. Like, for how many years was that prejudice ingrained in us that there was no value in it whatsoever? So I love thinking about that. That's so interesting.
Yeah. The other piece I wanted to mention, because maybe it'll remind me to put a link in the show notes, but because I mean, when you mention your son's interest in gaming and developing how he wants to proceed with developing his own game, it really it really depends on what part it is that they find fascinating. You hit that on the head. Which parts are worth my time investing in learning how to do, right? So I know for my son, the story has always been the most important piece. So there, which lends itself more to visual novel kind of games. And in the last 6 months or so, I came across some software where for developing visual novels that will make it easy for the person who has a great story and wants to implement it, but take care of the technology side. So I will put a link for that.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, it's just another piece to help people, see how many facets there are to it. It's so fascinating.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. And that leads us nicely to this next question. As we move to unschooling, we come to see that learning really does happen everywhere. And in fact, it seems to be something that we learn over and over. I mean, you mentioned even in the last 6 months, it's happened for you. And it happens for me too. I know just a few months ago, I felt that again. A few months later, you realize, oh my gosh, I know this even more deeply now and I thought I knew it completely before. So I was just wondering if that's been your experience.
Yeah, definitely. And we're still kind of at the beginning of all of this. My kids are almost 7 and 9, so they're still young. And at the beginning, when I mentioned my friend Vanessa first introduced me to the concept of unschooling, it made sense. Logically, it made sense, and I was on board as much as I possibly could be. But at the beginning, it really went. I went on a lot of trust of people who I knew who had gone before me and had answered all of the questions that I had. And then, I'd start to believe it on a little bit more of a deeper level from watching them. And then, of course, when you watch your own child actually experience that, whether it's, my actual first real understanding of unschooling was watching my daughter learn to swim on her own. And maybe it's different for every child. I have no idea. But my son, Owen, was in swimming lessons from the time he was 6 months old. My daughter, Sydney, when we lived in Tucson, Arizona, was just in the pool every day. And I was always right there with her. But she just kind of learned how to swim. And I don't know if every child can do that. But for me, that was like a huge eye opener of things may be different than I think they are. So that deepened my level of understanding. And then, watching both of my kids learn to read on their own, like that was just the most amazing. My background is a little bit of education. So I was taught how to teach kids how to read. So the fact that my kids did it on their own and were learning math and all this stuff, it was just that next level of a deeper understanding. And then seeing them connect different things they were reading to our big road trip from last year to, a movie or something, watching all those connections happen was just, it definitely deepens as I go personally, for sure. And also what I love is with those experiences, it reminds me of how much I don't get this yet and how good it is that I have all these mentors that I really respect, you and others, to be able to really understand that what they're saying is right on, and I can trust that and just trust that I don't get it yet, but I will in time.
Yeah, I love that point because I found the same thing too. You can, I think most people can kind of get it, on an intellectual level pretty quickly. But it's that next piece. It's why so often I was told, and I say to people now, try to give it at least 6 months, a year, because
Yes.
you need that time to start to really see it in your own children, like so that your intellectual understanding starts to actually mesh with your own personal experience. And then, man, you start to get it in your bones. And then, if you can give it a year of space and, just learning and really paying attention yourself, you probably will go through 2 or 3 of those cycles, and then you will seriously trust it.
I believe it, Pam. And, for me, there was a tipping point where I realized that if, from us hanging out and doing these things together, my kids were learning these things without me formally teaching them to them. There was a tipping point where I realized, if that's true, how much would I have stopped them from learning and understanding if I really had instituted that formal teaching policy, either by sending them to school or doing more school at home. And once I reached that tipping point, that was where I feel like my understanding, well, to this point anyway, has really deepened of the process of unschooling. And I've really been able to trust it and enjoy my kids more, which has been awesome.
Wow, that is such a great point about that tipping point. That is a huge piece of the puzzle when that clicks. That if you've given enough space that you can see over time where things go, and you can understand, gee, I would have jumped in there, and I would have kind of pushed it in a different direction. All right, let's try the next question. Moving to unschooling is not all about the learning. It's also about the strong relationships that connect us as a family, which in turn support that learning. I love how you describe this process. You wrote, changing our family dynamic is a process of learning about who we are, who our children are, and understanding the way we want our family to relate to each other. It is never a step-by-step protocol to follow. Rather, it is a self-examination and evaluation of whether or not our child and our family are happy. I love your insight that it's about moving from knowing what not to do to knowing what to do. I was hoping you could share with us some of your thoughts around that process.
Yeah, sure. I went back to when my oldest Owen was very young. It was really hard because when I'd be at the grocery store or Target or wherever, in the checkout line, there were always magazines geared toward parents, of course, and every one of them inside, over and over again, you would see 5-step protocols, 10-step, protocols, 3 ways to make your kid do this or make your kid do that. And it was always about, it was always a one size fits all, do this with, all the children of the parents who are reading this particular publication, and it applies to everybody. And it was always about the child. I never saw one about us as the parent. And that was frustrating because none of it ever applied to us, right? I mean, none of it ever applied to us. So it really, it got me questioning it and thinking maybe there was something more that I could consider in our relationship than these 5-step protocols. And that continued, all the way till now. I think anything that you pick up or read so often, it's just follow these steps and everything will be better. And my experience has been when I can focus on my kids and kind of put out all those requirements or protocols, that's when I can really evaluate how happy we are. And that can sound so corny. And even to the 15 years ago me, that would sound so corny to really evaluate our level of happiness. But I now, fortunately being introduced to this way of living with my kids, I value it so much. And it can be a check for me just at any point during the day to see how happy we're all feeling. Not that everything's always, believe me, not in my house, rosy and perfect or anything like that, but it is such a great marker for us. And as I tried to shift from that, I am moving from an authoritarian, way of parenting toward, living more respectfully with my kids. And the big thing that helped me with that initial transition was thinking about what I didn't want in our lives anymore. And I was able to do that by just check in to see how happy everybody seemed. And even, asking the kids, even when they were little, different quick questions, not to put the burden of responsibility on them or anything, but just to check in to see kind of, how they were doing generally in life and that kind of thing. And by eliminating the things that I didn't want to do in our home anymore, like I'm a recovering yeller. I hate that. I wish that my kids had never experienced that, but they did. So I knew to stop, I didn't want that in my life anymore. That's just one example of many things that I didn't want in our family anymore. So I had to first say, I don't want to yell anymore. And once I acknowledged that I didn't want that and I was doing it, then all of a sudden, just like magic, all these resources appeared to help me stop yelling and to look at things differently. And so I really, in my experience, understanding and just saying what I don't want anymore really does open the possibility to fill that in with what I do want in our family anymore. And sometimes I don't even know what that is ahead of time. Sometimes just knowing I don't want to yell anymore, gets filled in with something, obviously, of course, just so much better than yelling.
Yeah, well, I think that's such a great way to look at it, because it's so true. So much of our deschooling and our paradigm shifts start with understanding, oh, gee, look at the consequences of this. That's something that I don't want to do, but yet we don't know exactly what we're going to replace that with.
Yes.
And I think that's sometimes one of the things. That's one of the things that gets in the way with newer unschoolers. They release that stuff, and they hear the say yes more, and that don't control them, no rules kind of thing, and they just kind of get stuck there, I think, for a little while, because they don't know what to replace it with, and they're worried to do something. Yes. Oh, is this wrong? Is this wrong? Is this wrong? So I feel for them so much. I remember that time, when I was learning and you're kind of questioning everything that you were doing. But as long as it, as you said, opens you up to seeing what the possibilities are to replace it with, instead of kind of shutting you down. Oh, I have to stay hands off. I can't do anything. I'm kind of stuck here, and just kind of leaving them on their own, because that's not unschooling either. It's the connection and the relationship. Yeah. And being together that makes the unschooling.
And that moving through that, not knowing what to do in unschooling, when you get, at least in my experience, when I got those sweet spot moments of our relationship being so connected and really feeling like I got this unschooling thing. At first, those moments were so few and far between. They were kind of like that, for golfers, like that perfect golf shot, right? They're elusive, but they they increase the more that you practice, and that was my experience with moving through that period. Is I'd get that one moment of like, this is it. This is what it is. Yeah. We're happy. Our relationship is so strong and connected, and look at how he's flourishing or how she's flourishing. And, and then eventually moving beyond that, so that made up more of our day than less of our day. And we're never there all the time yet. I still have a lot to get over, but, those moments are so insightful, I think.
Yeah, they're very inspiring. And it's like, oh yeah, that's what I'm walking towards. That's what I'm walking towards. And
yes.
Reality is that that's what our life is walking towards those moments. There's no perfect life, perfect parent, perfect person. I mean, life happens, and we're human, and that's what excites me each day is walking towards the person and the parent that I want to be, right? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And all those moments in between that sustain you are awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Question 5. Many of us have triggers that sneak up on us and have us almost unknowingly placing expectations on our children. Maybe it's certain events like hitting school age or the teen years, while for others it may be a seasonal thing. as I look out the window and see the first year's snow.
Yeah.
You recently wrote a post on your blog about how this happens to you in the fall. Can you share how you've learned to recognize and move through that?
Yeah, I had just realized it this past fall, like July and August of this year going into this fall, I had just realized that each fall I noticed that my anxiety increases. And I noticed that I really come back to that having to fight off in my mind that schooly mindset, and I feel a lot of pressure that my kids should be doing this or they should be doing that. And for me, with the stuff that I'm overcoming, that translates into me snapping more at the kids, which is something that I've mostly ceased in our family. And it comes back to me being disconnected from them because I've got these expectations in my mind that are not in line with what's really happening in our life. So when I feel that anxiety increase and I feel those expectations come on, I can be pretty sure that there's, something else at play. So I realized this fall that had been happening every fall for the last 4 or 5 years for me, and that the trigger was back to school. All the commercials on TV, my whole Facebook feed, everybody's preparing their child for school with backpacks and lunches and uniforms and clothing and all this stuff. And we weren't doing any of that. So it was a trigger that I hadn't recognized till this year. So I was of course, so grateful to recognize that that's what it was, because for me now, as soon as I recognize it, like so much of the pressure just falls away. Once I can realize what's causing it, so much of it goes away. But I also recognized this year that it had been happening in such a big way for so many years that probably fall was a really important time for me to get myself surrounded with some people who, whose way of life I value, whether it's online groups or, for us, the Free to Be Unschooling conference that happens every fall now is huge for us. That's something that we have really come to rely on as a family. When June and July and August roll around, we know that we've got that coming in late September or early October, or have. I don't know if it will happen again, or have. And we've really used that as a place to just recharge and be around people who are living in a way that we hope to or are. And being surrounded by that community helps, after I've identified the trigger, to bring me back to our reality instead of the one that is happening on my Facebook feed and happening on TV and happening in the shows that we watch.
That's a great point, and it ties back to what we were talking about, being perfect. If we can recognize that when things are challenging for us, not to berate ourselves, but to be compassionate and understand and find the tools that help us move through those moments, rather than having those expectations on ourselves, not only on our kids, but also how they're on ourselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I found over the years that was, that became one of the really strong clues for myself that, something's going on, is when I started having expectations that weren't, expectations at all of my kids, but when the vision in my head wasn't aligning, you know what I mean, with what I was seeing, and I was expecting different things from them. Eventually, I came to see that was usually my clue that I had some work to do, right? That I had some figuring out to do. And I follow an author who calls it comparisonitis.
Yes.
Yeah, you get sucked into that, and it's so much more visible come fall, right? Because everybody's like getting ready, and
it's true. And I'm a recovering people pleaser. I know a lot of us are, but it's something that I've been working on. And so comparisonitis, or if that's the term that you just used, that is so prevalent. And doing this work on myself, I never realized how much of a part of me it is, but it is a tough one.
Oh, it's true. Especially, when your family, family and friends don't understand really either.
Yes.
So you can't kind of turn to them. That's what we taught when you mentioned, the conference, online groups, those tools, those are who we turn to when we kind of need that boost. These are this is the way I'm going to look at things, not that other way.
Yes, yes.
Question 6. Natural consequences is a frequent topic in the parenting world, yet often they are really talking about contrived consequences. And I was hoping you could talk about how you see the difference between those two things.
Yeah, for me, and it took me some time to get here, but for me, a natural consequence is something that just happens without kind of human intervention or parental intervention in the parenting scheme of things. And then a contrived consequence is something we manipulate the outcome for whatever the reason is, to teach a lesson or whatever the reason is, we manipulate the outcome. So an example of that, somebody on my Facebook page just asked if there was a post that listed a bunch of natural consequences versus contrived consequences. And by the end of the thread, she said, well, I could probably put this list together myself. And I said, I'm sure that you could, because once you get it, like, it's there. But, my son recently left his brand new sneakers outside, and we were going to have a rainstorm, and I could see that it was going to rain. So I brought the sneakers inside. They didn't. So to me, a natural consequence in that example would be the sneakers were left outside. He forgot about them. I never saw them. So they got wet. That just naturally happened. These things happen. A contrived consequence to me in that situation would be my son left his sneakers outside. It was about to rain. I saw the sneakers outside and thought, this will be a good way for him to learn that he has to be more responsible for his things. And I left the sneakers out there to get wet. Even knowing that he'd be really sad that these brand new sneakers that he loved would be ruined. So to me, that's the difference between natural and contrived consequence. And then kind of once I got that, I went on to think, well, then there's how do we address the consequence even when it's natural, which is if Owen's shoes would have been ruined, kind of another contrived consequence could have been, well, you don't get another new pair. Those are the ones that I bought you. Whereas, really what I would do in that situation is say, let's go get you another pair so you have some comfortable sneakers to wear. These things happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, because in actuality, the consequences is, the same. Mm-hmm. It's all in how we participate, the motivation behind it, because really we're setting them up. In a contrived consequences, we're manipulating, as you said, the situation to set them up to, quote, learn a lesson or something.
And there are so many natural consequences that teach us lessons on a daily basis. I don't feel like we need to contrive any to have our kids learn them.
I mean, I know, right?
Yes.
Once you get it, it's hard to imagine that people can't see that.
Yes.
Because I mean, as adults, shit happens all the time, right?
Absolutely. All day long. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, oh, gee, I wish and hope that my husband and, and my parents, my friends would help me as much as possible. So why wouldn't I do that for my kids?
And they do help us as much as possible, which is, I know this is a huge conversation, amongst all of us, but that idea that, if my husband left my sneakers out to get wet, well, I wouldn't have picked him as a husband.
Yeah.
if he was going to let my stuff get ruined to teach me a lesson. So
that feels vindictive, doesn't it?
It is. Yeah, totally. It is. I think it is vindictive.
When you talk about it between, adults, it seems horrible.
Right.
Yeah, you've got magazines telling you in those, protocols, do this so your kid learns.
Absolutely, Pam. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. That's another good. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, it really shows how little, respect they have for children as people.
And exactly, Pam, that's been another great, natural or contrived consequence. And in so many other areas, it's been such a good checkpoint for me to, when things aren't feeling quite right, I check in to see, is this what I would say to my husband or my sister or my, friend? It's been a really helpful checkpoint for me thinking that way.
Yeah. Question 7. Unschooling is about living together with our children, not about having all the answers. It's okay not to know what to do. And in those moments, our children get to see how we move through them. That's a really valuable skill to show our kids, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. And I've moved through this in so many different ways in my
I know,
own
right?
family. And again, I think it's one of those things I don't need to contrive any of it because I have enough real life examples happening in our world to show them that. But for me, whether it's especially when I was moving through like the gaming stuff, that was a really hard one for me to wrap my head around. And I was open to the fact that I was missing the point, but there was still that space between being open to it and practical application of really seeing the value in it. And so, many times in those instances, I would say to Owen, Owen, this is something I'm learning. I don't know how to handle this. I'm worried that you've been playing too much today and I don't feel like that's right, but I just don't know what to do. Can we go for a walk? And not that that was the right way to handle it or anything at all, but being honest in that situation. Owen appreciated my honesty rather than the alternative, which would have been my anxiety increasing and maybe lashing out in different ways that weren't really about the issue. And he appreciated that I was, again, not trying to burden him with, what I'm learning, but he appreciated the fact that I was trying to learn. Or if it's, if my son and daughter have a struggle or a situation come up, I frequently will say, I don't know what the answer is here. Like, I don't know. I don't know what to do here. Can we take a breather and do something else while I just try to figure out how we can work through this solution? And sometimes that in and of itself just takes care of whatever the situation was. And also on, when things like that come up, or when I've reacted in a way that is poor and I wish I hadn't, it's been really empowering for me to be able to say, I don't know why I reacted that way. I shouldn't have. I wish I hadn't. And I'm going to do some work on myself so that I can make sure that, doesn't happen again. And again, it's not a contrived situation. I would never do that to intentionally be able to say that to the kids. But when it does happen, I hope that at least it's modeling for them that nobody's perfect. We all do things that we wish we hadn't or wish we had handled them differently. And there's a way out of that without continuing down that path of destructiveness or not being kind, that we can stop it in its tracks and just say, I wish I hadn't done that. And I'm going to work on myself to not do it again. I'm sorry. I find that personally empowering, and I hope that my kids do too.
Well, I think it on one level, it really helps us to get to know each other better, right? And to understand each other's perspectives, which helps us more and more to better next time, work through those situations, work through challenges when somebody wants us, because you better understand the other person's perspective. And you know what? Our kids are smart and they are good at this. They can't, so many times my kids have been able to, point things out for me. And, they can eventually say, hey, I can see, you're going down this way, or, and how about this? Or they know just the right thing to say to help you shift. There's the right word.
Yes.
To help you shift and see things.
It is so true, Pam. And it's those moments, I think, are both beautiful and humbling and kind of awe-inspiring when your own child at young ages, right? They can look at you and say, like, Mom, is this happening for you right now? And it does shift things. And it's amazing. It's amazing.
I know. It goes back to what we were talking about before about not thinking, kids are capable.
Yes.
And that's the thing too, not to expect that they can do that, but it's just being open and honest and empathetic and admitting. And you can tell from your kids' reactions if they're starting to feel burdened
Yeah.
by it, because that is not the point. You're trying to share
Absolutely.
information and experience. You're not trying to put anything on them, right?
Right.
So, you can play it by ear, as in if you start to see that it's putting any weight on them, you know not to do that. But that's all learning about each other, right?
It is. And, the other thing I feel like for me personally, I don't know if this is others' experience, but for me personally, I came to a point, especially when I was recovering from yelling, I could only say sorry so many times. I could only look into their face and say sorry so many times without really realizing I was not making the effort I needed to not have to burden them with even that part of it anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, because they'll pick up.
Yeah.
They can tell, well, this is happening over and over and over.
Yes.
It's like, we're stuck in a cycle. And, it happens to them, it happens to us. And it's a great clue, that it's time to try something else. Yeah, no, it's so interesting. They're pretty fabulous, unschooling kids, aren't they?
Oh my gosh, it's so cool. It is such an awesome thing to watch. It really is, or be a part of and observe and all of it. They are awesome.
They are. Okay, question number 8. You are the founder of the website ourmuddyboots.com, as well as maintaining an active Facebook page for that group. I was wondering if you could share how you weave unschooling and your work together.
Yeah, sure. So sometimes I, will like go out to a coffee shop just because I enjoy it and do some writing or some blogging or on my Facebook page or whatever. But mostly I'm doing it right alongside my kids while Sydney's working on an art project and Owen's playing a video game. I'm sitting next to him on the couch or whatever. And it's been cool because they've learned, or they've been interested in a lot of what I'm doing. Maybe not the topics a lot of times, but creating a meme. Like my son Owen is also, and actually both kids are. He's getting into photography and watching me edit my photos and then put some text on them. He's been really interested in that and is starting to do that on his own. So it just easily kind of fits in and just is just kind of part of life. Yeah.
That's really cool. Yeah, it's like just working side by side, everybody doing what they're interested in.
Exactly. And they know that I'm passionate about it. And they know that it's really an outlet for me, the whole combination of it. So, in the downtime, I often prefer to do this over watching TV or even reading a book. So it's my kind of hobby with them.
And I think that's great. And it's one of the things that sometimes we might not think so important. What we think of, we want our kids to live this unschooling life, but I think it's so important to realize we want to live that lifestyle alongside them. We want to be that shining example of the person living and learning and doing the things they're interested in, right alongside them, so that they see it in action. You know what I mean?
Yes.
I'm not being raised this different way to be something different than my parents.
Yes.
Because sometimes that can get in the way.
Yes. You talked earlier about the deeper, deepening understandings of all of this. And what you just talked about, Pam, over the last 6 months has been one of the understandings that has deepened hugely for me. That idea that us enjoying our life is important. And that doesn't have to be defined by what the magazines say we should be doing for me time.
Exactly.
It looks very different than that. Enjoying life is very different than that me time requirement. And that has been such a big shift for our whole family when I understood that.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to include a link because I had that realization. I don't know, it was 2 or 3 years ago. I wrote a blog post about that.
Yeah.
Because I find that really fascinating, that whole idea of, you need your me time. You need to, because on one hand, it's true, but you don't, anyway, you don't need it to be separate
Right.
And the thing is, if you understand a need for it to be separate, you can, explain it and have that conversation. It's not a separating thing, it's a connecting thing.
And sometimes, no, maybe more so when they're babies or not, depending on what they're going through, sometimes requiring yourself to take that me time actually has the very opposite effect on you because you don't want it. You don't feel like it's the right, like I hate having my hair done. I do not like, I get it done, but I don't like going like that. That's not me time, but a lot of magazines tell me that should be my me time. And, and especially if I'm leaving my daughter when she's upset, there's nothing invigorating or fulfilling for me about having my hair done while my daughter's upset,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I know. Well, we were talking about the messages, we get, especially when our children are younger, right? And it can be crazy how separating those things are.
Yes.
Yeah. Question number 9. You are recently back from speaking and playing at the Free to Be Unschooling Conference, which you mentioned a bit ago, in Arizona. I was hoping you could share something about your experience.
Well, we had never been to any homeschooling conference before the first Free to Be a few years ago. And we'd never been around so many, I guess, radical unschoolers, really. And so that first one, and the two after, but that first one was so empowering for my husband and I, and mostly for my husband. That was the first time. My husband's not a big reader. He's not a Facebook guy. He doesn't listen to podcasts. So he was getting all the information through me kind of about what we were doing. And that first Free to Be was when I really watched him become empowered as an unschooling dad. The shift in him from who he was when the day before we arrived to who he was the day after we left was monumentous. It really was. And he was so much happier, and he was so grateful and so much more connected to the kid. And he got what we were doing more. He understood it, and he got to hear from grown unschoolers, and he got to talk to other dads. And it was just such a huge experience for all of us, and especially for him. And every year now, as I've mentioned, it's really become a highlight of our year and something that we really rely on to be in that community and to just be reminded of why Chris and I, my husband and I, are putting in all this personal work to, overcome a lot of our stuff, and to just see all these kids treated really as people, or, mostly treated as people. It's just such a cool experience, and so hopeful and so empowering. And the gratitude that we both feel toward Jen and Mike McGrail is just immense, for putting that together. And they do such a nice job. They really do, of making sure there's great fun shops for the kids, and, a speaker for everybody. And so we just love it.
Yeah, I know. It is amazing to see it in action with people, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
It is. It's surreal. You can't imagine it, right? Until you're there. You just can't imagine what that looks like.
Oh, yeah. No, I remember, because as I said, I knew nobody that homeschooled, let alone unschooled, and nobody locally. And I remember, I guess we had been, the kids had been home for almost maybe a year and a half. And it's like, okay, I want to see some of these people face to face, because it had only been online that I had discovered groups and stuff. So yeah, we drove from Ontario down to South Carolina to go to our first unschooling conference.
Oh my gosh, that is awesome.
It was amazing.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
And it's true, sometimes it's the same for my husband. He had the bits that I had kind of explained, but he didn't have the interaction, even of the online groups and stuff. So it was wonderful for him to see that people were doing it, and these kids were cool, and to see the parents and the kids interacting, with respect for each other. And yeah, it's, if it's something that an environment that you might enjoy. And you know what? That's the other thing I found too, is you really, the nice thing about there's not really a lot of expectations there.
Yes.
As in, you can go to a conference and, be yourself in that, if you love connecting with people and talking and everything, there's opportunities for that. If you're a quieter person, more of an introvert, you don't have like the stares at you or like, why are you weird or whatever. It's such an accepting environment, isn't it?
Oh my gosh, Pam, this is one of the things after that first Free to Be, it was when people asked how it was, the people who really wanted to know, who really wanted to know how it was. It's one of the things I said to them, that understanding or kind of being in this environment of living this way, I got this understanding of how much bigger than it is than whether our kids learn to read or write. It's like this whole lifestyle of exactly what you described. Like, we had friends whose children really mostly stayed in their room the whole time they were there. And you know what? Everybody thought that was just fine. Nobody even thought about it. It was just like, it was so cool. And it's one of the things I most love about this lifestyle is just that idea of being who you are, which is so talked about widely, but I had never been exposed to anybody living it before.
Exactly. It's so often you hear it as words, but with unschoolers, you really see it in action. So beautiful, right?
Now I'm getting like tears and goosebumps because it really is, Pam. It is so true.
Yeah, I have goosebumps too. All right, question 10. Looking back now, what for you so far has been the most valuable outcome from choosing unschooling?
Well, that is a perfect lead in to this question because it really is. I mean, there are a lot of things, obviously, that I love about it. We were on a trajectory with our family to be that harried, crazy family who went to school, did sports, did a musical instrument, required it all, had expectations, and it would have been busy and crazy and miserable. That's been a great thing to not have in our lives. I'm also so glad that my kids and I aren't forced to separate every day and miss each other. So that, all those kinds of things. But what we were just talking about, that is ultimately, at this point anyway, what has been the greatest part of being exposed to living this way and living this way ourselves, is that really understanding what unconditional acceptance and unconditional love is, or at least understanding it more than I ever had to this point, really appreciating people for who they are, and my kids especially, because if we had continued down the path that we were on, I wouldn't even know my kids. How could I have possibly known them if they were told where they were going to be and what they were going to think about during school hours? And then they were going to be told they had to play. My son doesn't even like sports, but he would have been required to play a sport and probably required to play some instrument instead of learning the part about music that he really likes, So I wouldn't have even known them because they would have been forced down a path of who other people thought they should be. And so that really has been the greatest part of all of this, is really getting to see who my kids are. And just when I think they're kind of going along one way, they completely switch direction and are turning into these just different and awesome people who are thinking about and experiencing things so different than I do or ever did. And it's definitely been the best part. And that, of course, applies, as we were just talking about, for me to all of life, because once I could start appreciating my kids for who they are instead of who they were supposed to be, I could start doing that with myself, which is not just a gift to me, but a gift to my family. The fact that I don't enjoy small talk. I could finally say, like, okay, that's not a bad thing. That just is a thing. Like, it's just who I am, and, a million other things. And I could start appreciating that with everybody who I meet out in the world. And I really get to see people more for who they are than for, who I'm kind of forcing us to be in a relationship. I don't know. That's not very clear, but it's been huge for me.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. And you know what phrase hit me as you were talking about that? It's free to be themselves.
Yes.
And then it's like, oh, that's a great name for a conference.
Right. And like, talk about deepening understandings. Like, what a cool name when you first heard it. And after year 3 being there, Chris and I are like, oh, free to be.
I get it.
I get it.
And then
it's not rhetoric.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not just, a cute phrase. No, it really
Yes.
is it. And I love so much that with this lifestyle, we learn so much through watching our children, don't we? When we see them being free and understanding themselves, it opens up, it kind of like it gives us permission to all of a sudden discover who we really are, right? And to live that as fully. Yeah, no, it's pretty cool. Well,
it really is. It is.
Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today, Jennifer. It was so much fun.
Thank you so much, Pam. I really appreciate it.
Oh, that's great. And before we go, where's the best place for people to connect with you online?
So we do have an active Facebook page, Our Money Boots, and we're also, and the blog is ourmoneyboots.com. And I'm trying to move over a little more to Instagram and Twitter, and those are both Our Money Boots also. And Pam, just before we end, I wanted to just thank you and several other mentors who have been so helpful for so many of us, truly, going back to that beginning and not knowing which way to go or how to feel supported. The work that you and others do has just been so instrumental in this shift for my family, and I'm so, so grateful.
Oh, thank you so much, Jennifer. That's sweet.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you again, and I wish you and your family a wonderful day.
Thanks, Pam.
Thanks. Thanks for listening today. I hope you found it helpful. You might also like the backlist episodes at livingjoyfully.ca/podcast. You can also get your free Exploring Unschooling ebook at livingjoyfully.ca/exploring unschooling. If you'd like to connect, you can also find me on Facebook at Living Joyfully. Until next time, have fun living and learning with your family.